Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to today's presentation, which is Unlocking Green Tax Incentives, Strategies for Energy Efficient Building Savings, brought to you today by Jordan Skala Engineers and TaxTaker. So we're going to go through and meet our speakers in a minute. I'll introduce you to those. We're going to have a quick housekeeping session. We will be discussing then Section 179D. We will outline the eligibility requirements, the summary of changes brought about by the Inflation Reduction Act. We'll also be talking about who is eligible, how it's calculated, and we will give you some examples. Before that, we'll be talking about the 45L tax credit. That relates to 45L with Energy Star certification, how that's applied, what the requirements are for the program, the advantages, Green Program Alliance, and frequently answered questions, of which there have been many over the last couple of years. At the end of the session, we will be doing a Q&A. If we have time, and during the program, you will be able to ask questions through the question section on the Zoom app. So moderators today, I am Mike Dawson. I work for Jordan Skala Engineers. I am the client solutions guy for the sustainability team. Joining me today will be Austin Legler, who's the head of partnerships at TaxTaker. Our speakers today are James Brown, who's the head of sustainability at Jordan Skala Engineers. James has over 20 years of experience in architecture, engineering, and construction industry. He currently serves as associate principal and senior manager of sustainability, directs on a large team through projects of various sizes and scopes. His area of expertise lies in inspecting, consulting and training for Energy Star, LEED, and the IECC, International Energy Conservation Codes. Abby of TaxTaker is the Vice President of Energy Incentives. She's a specialty tax incentives consulting firm headquartered in Austin, Texas. Abby's got a BS in civil engineering from Purdue University and is a professional engineer licensed in 46 states. As a LEED accredited professional, Abby's dedicated to sustainable building practices. Before tax consulting, Abby spent almost a decade specializing in commercial building design. Her experience now includes optimizing client energy incentives by leveraging her in-depth understanding of the Inflation Reduction Act and the program centered around real estate, energy efficiency, and renewable energy property. So quick housekeeping notes. If you are getting or have registered for AIA PDH credits today, this webinar is AIA accredited for one learning unit or one professional development hour. If you requested an AIA or PDH certificate during registration, you'll receive it within 2 weeks and will also report AIA credits directly. The question and answers can be asked in the Q&A box as we go along. And there will be follow-up materials. There'll be a copy of the recording and other materials which will be sent out within 1 week of today's program. We'll also be doing some poll questions. We're going to have 3 during the presentation. You'll have a minute to answer, and we'd appreciate it if everybody could join in, please. So we have poll question number 1. And we would like to know what factors are driving you to learn more about green tax incentives today. So it's multiple choice, and if you could answer, we would appreciate it very much.
Thank you for covering all that stuff, Mike. Yeah, we'll give you a few seconds more for you all to get your answers in. Oh, and looks like a predominant reason that we're all here is for the financial. Since everybody likes money, I guess I can kind of see that reasoning. But good to know that some jurisdictional requirements, company sustainability goals, and other reasons. So wonderful. Thank you all for giving us a good, clear idea of what's going on today. So I'll jump into the first section here of going over the 45L. Now, the 45L is officially branded as the new energy efficient home credit. Both programs that Abby and I are going to be talking about have distinct and a few differences on where they apply and where they don't. The 45L is specifically for residential buildings, whether or not it's a specific for your standard for purchase single family home, or whether it's for a 100-story high-rise apartment tower. It covers all residential end uses and can be applicable. So want to first start with a disclaimer. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. I'm at heart a green certification guy. I'm not a tax professional, nor do I play one on TV. So certainly make sure that if you find this of interest, that you discuss it with your tax professional to make sure that it is the right program for you. We'll be looking over some case study information. We'll talk about the requirements and some important dates to know. But we also want to identify very specifically the 45L is a tax credit rather than a deduction. So this means more of a one-to-one money transfer if you're able to successfully achieve it. So, but let's start with the fun thing. Let's look at a case study. Let's take a hypothetical 300-unit project in Houston. We've got 8 unique unit types. There's 10 buildings on the property that are 3 stories. Each building has 30 units each. The property's pursuing a HUD loan, looking to get the mortgage insurance premium reduction, which is a great benefit for those utilizing a HUD loan. So these things kind of combined from different sources, the project could end up with over $800,000 at the end of the project. The mortgage insurance premium reduction program would give them 25 basis points off of that MIP. And you'd also end up with a known trusted brand for marketing, since Energy Star, the EPA did a great job of their brand building for Energy Star, and everybody knows and trusts what Energy Star is. So digging more into the money aspect, for single family projects, which include single family for rent, include townhome projects, with Energy Star certification, you can get $2,500 per unit. And it's pretty straightforward for the 45L. Get a certification and get the applicable amount of money. Now, if that single family project also goes for the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home program, they could get $5,000 per unit. Now, multifamily is a little bit different, and as you see, there's 2 amounts for the Energy Star certification or the Zero Energy Ready Home. The different amount that you see is based off of whether or not prevailing wages are met. If a project meets those prevailing wages, they get 5 times the amount of money. And notice a little typo there, just for clarification, that Energy Star certification can get the $2,500 per unit if they meet the Energy Star with prevailing wages, as opposed to what it's showing at the 2,000. So what does it take for Energy Star in relation to residential homes? Well, yeah, at the forefront, you need an energy model to identify your expected energy savings, and you need on-site visual verification and testing. Now, Energy Star has a goal for any of their programs of trying to get a 15 to 20% more efficient product. They want to push things forward and reach that higher levels of energy efficiency. Now, everybody always wants to know, we're just like, okay, well, what's it take to be Energy Star? How much does it cost? Well, the improvements depend on where you're building, where you are starting from, and when the building will be complete. So certainly the energy code, the building codes that the building is under have a big impact. What MEP systems are already being planned on being used. And we're going to be talking about this particular thing called an acquire date. The EPA decides what Energy Star version. If you just want to get certified, it is based on the permit date. But the 45L has identified that the Energy Star version you use has to be based off this acquire date. For single family homes, it's pretty easy. Either when the home is purchased or when it is leased, then that is the acquired date. Multifamily, it's a little bit nebulous, and this is predominantly the key reason that we say, please make sure to talk to your tax professional. The acquired date for a multifamily at this point is largely being seen as when the building is complete and being certified. Could be leased. The purchase can be viewed as not being completed until the building is complete. So most of the industry is identifying and communicating to the multifamily projects about this when the project is complete. So what that means is that if you have a single family new homes project, then it needs to, within 2025, meet this national version 3.2. But multifamily, if you are completing after 2027, on or after 2027, you need to do the most current version of national version 1.2 of the multifamily new construction protocols. Now, this is significant because before that, we could do the 0.1s. The 0.2s are modeled after the 2021 building codes. So regardless of the area that you're at, for Energy Star and for this program, you're going to be compared to the 2021 building codes. But let's look into some more specifics. But before we do that, we want to identify that there's 3 different pathways that can be taken. There's a prescriptive, there's an energy rating index, and there's an ASHRAE pathway. The prescriptive, while very clear, it usually shows that it's more expensive since there's no trade-offs through an energy model. Both the energy rating index and the ASHRAE path both use energy models, but they look at things slightly different, where the energy rating index models the individual dwelling units, and the ASHRAE model is a whole building model. But all 3 pathways do require design reviews and field verification checklists. So within the dwelling units, what this means, and largely for the ERI path, is what are we going to be compared against so that we can pass the model. The first and foremost thing that we want to talk about is the heat pump water heaters, which is a new item for version 3.2. If you're using electric water heating, you have to do heat pump water heaters of a rather modest energy efficiency requirement. This is going to be now your biggest cost increment to be able to pursue this program. In current pricing, we are seeing and being told that it is somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 for these heat pump water heaters if located within the dwelling unit. So when thinking of we can get either $500 or $2,500 for Energy Star, the heat pump water heaters eat up a lot of it. And so unless you're in an area, and some municipalities are already mandating the need that if for heat pump water heaters, if you're doing electric water heating, the cost increase might be prohibitive if you're only getting $500 per unit. Some of the other things that we see that people will need to do is for resistant strip heating, that's not allowed in most locations. You need to have heat pumps. Also need to make sure that your bathrooms and kitchens are exhausted to specific amounts and that you're bringing in fresh air to ASHRAE 62.2. We need to make sure that the air fully transfers through the dwelling unit. So there's the need for transfer grills or jump ducts in all bedrooms. As identified, we're being compared to the 2021 codes. So therefore, our envelope requirements for insulation need to meet those 2021 standards. There are appliance requirements that to pass the model effectively, we see that you need an Energy Star fridge and dishwasher and efficient ceiling fans. Now, with Energy Star, they don't only want an energy efficiency requirement. They want to make sure that it's performing correctly. So the program requires a variety of different tests from the blower door, the duct tightness, bedroom pressure differential, hence the need for the transfer grills, And we need to test that bathroom exhaust, kitchen exhaust, and fresh air. Within the amenity spaces, attached amenity areas within a building also have to meet some specific requirements. But if we go back to our example previously of the 10 building apartment complex, a detached clubhouse would not need to meet any of these requirements. Only specifically for if the amenity areas are in common spaces are attached to the buildings. There's a few other minor requirements. The owner does need to have a special requirement to have a data acquisition strategy. Energy Star is helping lead people towards the eventual energy benchmarking that is already mandatory in a number of municipalities. So Energy Star wants to make sure that people have identified a data acquisition strategy to be able to meet future benchmarking requirements. The EBA does ask that the owner gets into a partner agreement, but this is a no-cost, easy process and can generally be completed within 30 minutes. Lastly, there is a requirement for functional testing to be performed. Our general recommendation is usually for the installing contractor to get certified under an HKETO to be able to complete this functional testing themselves. We are in a version change at the moment where Energy Star has identified a potential for revision 5 of the multifamily protocols, where maybe this HKETO requirement might be going away. So something to keep in mind as we look forward. Some of the other advantages to pursuing Energy Star with 45L is, as already identified, it aligns very closely with the 2021 Energy Code. So some of what's being required, if you're in an area that is the 2021, then a lot of the things that Energy Stars ask you to do is already going to be mandated with code. So it can be an easy alignment. It also combines well with other above code programs, can help with green financing. So our example, we identified a HUD loan, but there's also Fannie and Freddie both have green loans. That Energy Star is an acceptable program for those green loans. Already identified that Energy Star fits within a very nice targeted leasing message, so that since it's so well known. Lastly, it also meets GRESB requirements for reporting for your energy rating if you are an owner or know of an owner that needs to do GRESB reporting. So let's touch back again upon the Green Program Alliance. Well, the Energy Star, as identified, requires an energy model visual verification and testing. Well, the LEED BD plus C does need an energy model as well, but it doesn't get into the visual verification and testing since it's a documentation-based verification model. But LEED for residential, what most people know as LEED for homes and multifamily mid-rise, matches very well since they're also a visual verification model, and so require the energy model, the testing, and that visual inspection. NGBS is another great program. Now, I've asterisked NGBS because while the energy model is not mandatory, you can use it, and you can use Energy Star as a compliance pathway through the energy section. It does require visual verification, but testing isn't explicitly mandated, but because it follows the 2018 IECC. So if you are an area that of the 2018 or higher that requires testing, then NGBS mandates the same protocols. In relation to additional funding sources out there, we'd like to point out that Energy Star can also set you up well for a utility program. Two examples are, our case study that I identified previously with Houston, the local utility company CenterPoint has wonderful incentive programs for both single family and multifamily projects. With the multifamily projects achieving an average of an additional $260 per unit. They're also an energy model and visual verification based, and they give bonuses for above code programs. Encore, which is in a large territory within Texas, has a single family program that provides a bonus for Energy Star, but it also is energy model and visual verification. So everything can align to be able to maximize your benefit. So where is that low hanging fruit, since we covered a large amount of stuff? Both the single family for rent projects and your HUD loans are going to be your primary sources at the moment for your low hanging fruit. Both of those types of projects can get the $2,500, which can offset some of the costs that it incurred, and you can still come out to be net positive. If you are in a location where, say, your 3 stores or less, the jurisdiction requires a heat pump water heater, and or you're in 2021 energy code, the more that the code requirements offset Energy Star, the more feasible it becomes for even potentially, say, that $500 per unit. Now, depending on the project type that you have, some programs, some locations, maybe just your equity partner is saying, we want you to get Energy Star. Well, knowing that if you're having to do it anyway, you have some of this additional funding that can help pay you back for what you're already being asked to do. Wanted to touch upon some frequently asked questions that we run into a fairly decent amount. First, can this be earned every year? No, with the 45L, it is a one-time only tax credit per project. And when can it be claimed? After the project is complete and certified. How do you prove the prevailing wages? Well, IRS says that you must keep your payroll documentation and be able to provide that in the event that you're ever asked. Lastly, I have a project that just completed. Can I get the new credit? No, unfortunately, since this credit needs the on-site verification and there's the very specific requirements about what has to go in, a completed project won't be able to meet the Energy Star certification requirements and get the 45L. One of the reasons we started today with the 45L was because this is very strongly a design and construction focused tax credit and certification program. Well, that completes my part. So we will open now poll question 2. So what we want to ask right now is, so what project market types are you most active in? Are you a multifamily or single family project? Do you have commercial, industrial, or healthcare, higher education, or retail in your portfolio? Because if you do, Abby has some great stuff to talk to you about. Okay, looks like a lot of multifamily people here, which certainly for the Energy Star side of things makes me, makes me happy. But we have a lot of other building types available. So, like I said, I think you're going to be really happy to hear what Abby has to say. All right, take it away, Abby.
Thanks all. Thanks, James. Welcome everybody. James, thank you for walking us through the 45L tax credit. Before I jump into section 179D, Mike and James, did you want to address any of the questions in the question chat?
Yeah, so we have had a couple of questions, James. Some of them have already been answered during the course of the presentation. So for the appliances, do they have to be Energy Star? I know you touched upon that. Some of the appliances do, some do not. Will the 45L and Energy Star require benchmarking? I know you said that there's a data acquisition strategy that has to be in place, but does that mean that they have to benchmark annually?
No. If you're doing the HUD loan, HUD requires you to do annual benchmarking. But at this time, Energy Stars only wants to make sure that you have a strategy in place. You don't have to actually implement it, but you do have to have the ability to do benchmarking if and when it becomes a requirement for you.
Okay, and there's a few questions coming in, which we'll probably get to these at the end. But very quickly, I saw there was some healthcare people among us today, and can you touch upon how 45L or the Inflation Reduction Act can be of value to the healthcare sector?
Oh, yes, and some of the healthcare sectors, say independent living, can still take advantage of this. Memory care is too specialized, and it falls too much within the healthcare. But if it is an R occupancy, then the majority of those projects are going to be able to qualify for the Energy Star certification and the 45L. Great question.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, James. Thank you, Mike. We'll go ahead and jump into the section 179D energy efficient commercial buildings deduction now. So a summary of changes implemented by the Inflation Reduction Act. I like to highlight this especially because for some of our folks on the call who didn't know, the 179D deduction has been around for quite some time, since the Energy Policy Act of 2005. It did go underneath a bunch of changes in the Inflation Reduction Act, and these rules will be in place through the end of 2032. So a couple of highlights I'd like to point out are the increased deduction. If you're familiar with the old program, we got a maximum of $1.80 per square foot plus some inflation adjustments. Now the maximum is $5 per square foot plus inflation adjustment. So a big change there. There is now a deduction reset. So in the prior program, you could receive a 179D deduction on a building once, and once it was taken up, it was gone for good. So now you only have to consider the 179D deduction in the last 3 years, which means essentially every 4th year, you can claim a 179D deduction again. For 179D, there's an interesting portion of the program that allows designers to claim this on behalf of government building owners. And included now, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, we can also have tax exempt entities give away their deductions to those designers. The results analysis is different. We do an energy modeling analysis to determine the 179D deduction. That way that we have done that now has changed, which actually makes it more advantageous for many building owners to claim more value. And there was an alternative method introduced. So traditionally, we've always used the energy modeling analysis for any sorts of projects. Now we can actually do a before and after look at the building for qualified retrofit projects. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a minute. So the 179D program, what is it? This is the, again, energy efficient commercial buildings deduction. It is available to anyone who is installing one of 3 energy efficient systems: HVAC and hot water. So think your domestic hot water systems, interior lighting, and building envelope components. So think roofs, windows, insulation, things of that nature. If you're installing one or more of these components in your project, you are eligible to claim the 179D deduction. On these lists of eligible projects, we can look at new construction, we can look at renovation or retrofit projects, and we can look at additions or expansions to existing buildings. Again, as long as they touch one of those 3 systems or multiple of those systems, then we're in great shape. Project size, what we look at when we consider project size is when are you going to get enough value from the 179D deduction to make this worth your while? So with the old program and the lower rates, really you need to be at a building size of 25,000 square feet or larger for it to make sense. Now with the increased rates at $5 per square foot, we can look down as small as to buildings as 10,000 square feet or larger. Because this is a deduction per square foot, the larger the building, the better, and the higher deductions you could potentially receive. In addition, a qualification that must be met is that you do have to have conditioned building space. So for the IRA, that means that anything that is heated or cooled, you can have either or. It just can't be unconditioned space. We can't consider that for the 179D deduction. If you have a parking garage that was placed into service in 2022 and you never claimed the 179D deduction, you can actually go back and claim it. Parking garages used to have a special provision in this program, but unfortunately have been removed since the IRA's new legislation.
Abby, I'm seeing a question here that might be relevant to that slide. Someone is asking what
Sure.
building types qualify for 179D?
Oh, great. Perfect. So we're going to go right into that right now, Austin. Thank you for pointing that out. So in the eligibility to claim the Section 1790 deduction, there's two categories. Your first is your private building owner. So if you're a taxpayer, you're implementing a project, then you get to claim the 1790 tax deduction. Eligible buildings include anything commercial. So think office building, think high-rise residential building that's 4 stories or higher, hospitals, schools, you name it, anything that falls within commercial. That can also include industrial or manufacturing. Again, if it's conditioned. For eligible projects, for a private building owner, we can actually look back at projects that were completed in the past. That's a common misconception I hear. And we can look back to any projects completed since this was introduced to the tax code, which would be eligible for projects completed in 2026 and on. For most of my clients, we're not looking that far back, but I have had clients look as far as 10 years back and still claim a 1790 benefit. So this is an important part of the program to note. For private building owners, this benefit is considered an accelerated depreciation deduction. So if you're familiar with cost segregation as a tool that you can use for your new construction or your purchase projects, 1790 operates very similarly on a tax application. And this particular deduction always goes on the next original or extended filing. You don't have to amend a return if you're a private building owner to claim the 1790 benefit. We're going to talk about the other bucket now of folks who qualify, and those are designers. And in the tax code, they define anyone as who creates the technical specifications for the installation of that energy efficient property as a designer who can potentially claim the 1790 tax deduction. In this case, the eligible projects that you would be able to claim a benefit as a designer are on government or tax exempt owned projects. So the reason being that your government and your tax exempt owners do not pay taxes, therefore they cannot use this tax deduction and can give it to their eligible designers as a thank you for helping them install these energy efficient systems. For a designer, the application looks a little bit different in which projects that you can claim. You do have to amend a tax year for the project based on when that project's placed into service. So if you placed a project in service in 2022, you would amend your tax return in 2022 to claim that benefit. That is why any projects that completed construction either this year or 3 years back, that's usually the time frame you have to amend a return, are the eligible projects. So for designers who are looking into claiming the 1790 benefit, there is a time consideration that should be made to make sure that you claim everything that you're entitled to claim. So how is 1790 calculated? We are doing an energy modeling analysis. This is the traditional method, and determining the annual energy cost savings as a percentage by comparing a look at the building, which is called the proposed model. This is the building with the project in place. And what we're really isolating is those 3 energy efficient systems, the HVAC, the lighting, and the building envelope. That's what we're highlighting. All of the other off-focus systems are being set to a baseline standard. Then we're going to compare that to a reference building. It's a common misconception that 1790 is a before and after look. It's actually not. We're going to take a look at the building with the project, and we're going to compare that to a reference building that is a baseline minimum standard for that building size as prescribed by ASHRAE 90.1 2007. I really like to highlight the 2007 because this code is significantly older than most of the building codes we're already using on our current projects, which means that many of these projects qualify for the 1790 benefit, even without making any sort of tweaks to the current scope. New construction especially does quite well. Really anything that's putting in LED lighting is a great candidate because in 2007, the baseline lighting standard was based off of fluorescent lighting. So already you can see there's an opportunity to capture that energy savings percentage comparatively to that reference building.
Another good question here, Abby, that's relevant to the slide. How big does a renovation need to be to qualify for 1790?
Good question. So we talked about the building size. That's important, right? So we want to look at buildings anywhere, especially with the IRA, 10,000 square foot or higher. When it comes to a renovation, the amount of the building you impact is important. If it's a really small renovation, usually those don't make a ton of sense for the Section 179D deduction. My quick rule of thumb is impacting 20% or more of the building. That's probably a good project to look at. If you're on the fence, though, we can of course talk with your team and help determine if that project is a good fit for the program. Thanks, Austin. Okay, so we're going to talk about how what those rates are and how that's qualified for the 179D deduction. Here you're going to see the prevailing wage again, plus 179D has apprenticeship program. So what we've learned from the IRA is that many of these incentives have bonus rates because of these prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, and 179D falls within that category, and so does 45L. So this will be for projects that completed construction on or after January 1st. The top bar here is if you meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, and the bottom bar is if you don't meet the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. The minimum total annual energy and power cost reduction we need to prove out is 25%. So once you prove out 25%, you're going to get some amount of deduction. At the does not meet, you're going to get 50 cents per square foot. And then if you do meet those requirements, you'll get $2.50 per square foot. Each additional energy savings percentage point you get gets you more value, up to a maximum of 50% or higher. So once you hit 50%, you've reached the maximum deduction. Every energy savings point you get above that is great. You have an energy efficient building, but you will only receive the maximum benefit above that, which is the $5 per square foot, or $1 per square foot if you don't meet the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. So you can see meeting these requirements is a significant impact to the deduction amount, but there's still value to be had if they're not going to be achievable on a certain project. So the deduction is still worth looking into. I have a quick example for you here. This is a building owner that we worked with recently. They had a 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility. In their facility, they did a renovation project in 2023 that included HVAC and interior lighting components. Most of both systems were replaced in this case. So as you can see, the proposed model and the reference model, we have the annual energy costs. The proposed model did 55.32% better than the reference building, so they actually qualified for the maximum benefit. In this case, because it's a 2023 project, they got the $5 per square foot plus the inflation adjustment, which was 36 cents per square foot, bringing them to $536,000 in a 179D tax deduction. In the case of some of these projects, they can be stacked with other incentives, which is wonderful. This is just one of the incentives and what we're talking about today. But this building owner also was able to capitalize on some cost segregation benefit as well. So we talked about the energy modeling, and I brought up this new alternative method that the Inflation Reduction Act has introduced to the tax code. This is important because we've always done the energy modeling analysis, and now the IRS is allowing us to take a look at a before and after picture of the building to determine energy savings and then a resulting 179D deduction. So this method would only be available for qualified retrofit plans. And what that means is if you are implementing a retrofit project and it is signed off as an energy efficiency project from an architect or an engineer, then that would be considered a qualified retrofit project. We are measuring energy use intensity. So we want to look at the before of the project for the energy use intensity and after for the EUI score, and that's what will determine the deduction. However, we are waiting on more guidance from the IRS to determine how to use this section. There's many parts of the IRA that were rolled out, so we know that they're coming, but they do require more guidance. And so this is one of those sections. I'm really hoping that this year we'll get that guidance. We're certainly happy to share that with anybody who's interested to know. But this is going to be another great way for building owners to capture the 179D benefit, especially if they can't make giant CapEx projects work. Now they can do incremental changes to the building, show some of the energy savings as compared to the previous building state, and capture 179D deduction. I'm going to quickly highlight what those prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements are so that you understand them both for the 45L and the 179D deduction, since they do impact the savings that you can receive significantly. So prevailing wage requirement, all laborers and mechanics employed by the taxpayer or any contractors or subcontractors on the project should be paid prevailing rates that are published by the Department of Labor based on the locality of the building. That's the most important piece. You can use www.sam.gov as a great way to look up the state and county and the construction wages in that area. So you can determine what wages you're paying already and what changes would need to be made to meet those prevailing rates. In addition, for 179D specifically, this does not apply for 45L, or the apprenticeship requirement. And what the apprenticeship requirement is you must have a total number of hours worked on the project by qualified apprenticeship programs. In most cases now, that's 15% of your total labor hours should be worked by qualified apprentices. In addition, there's some other requirements that need to be met, like you can't have too many apprentices to one journey worker. We need to make sure that the learning is still effective. And if you have a trade that has 4 or less laborers or employees working on the project, you actually don't need an apprentice for that in that case. So if you have a really small project or one trade has a very small scope, you may not need an apprentice for that trade. I do like to highlight there is a good faith exemption, which means that essentially if you're reaching out to these qualified apprenticeship programs, maybe this is new to your area, you're not union heavy labor, and either you cannot reach someone, maybe they aren't responding to your request for qualified apprentices, or it was denied, they just don't have the folks to send to your job to cover the 15% of the hours, then you actually can qualify through this good faith exemption. You just need to clearly document that you attempted to get these apprentices on the project, and you need to meet the prevailing wage. And if you can do those two things, then you can still claim those bonus rates as outlined in the prior slide. Okay, that's everything for me and my section. We'll go ahead and open it to some Q&A.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of questions in the Q&A section, which I love to see. Love to see people participating. Some of these pertain to 45L and some to 179D. So we'll let James and Mike chime in for any of the 45L ones, but I'll go ahead and just start running through these. And
Sure.
just know, any questions we don't get to, we'll try and get to as many as we can, but any questions we don't get to, we will still answer those and send a follow-up document after the presentation. So all questions will get answered one way or the other. So let's start with Kathy here. I think this one is related to 45L. Are HPWHs required for all Energy Star V1.2 compliance paths?
James, you're on mute.
Of course, somebody's always has to be on mute. It's not a webinar if someone is not on mute. The heat pump water heaters are not explicitly mandated, but since you're being compared in the baseline to heat pump water heaters, we did an analysis to try to find where some of that sweet spot. What is the recommendation? And we could not find a way that we could completely not do heat pump water heaters and still get the energy model to pass. And what we can say and identify is that with the heat pump water heaters, they're the minimum level that we're being compared against and the available product on the market, there's a huge difference. So we pick up, by doing the heat pump water heaters, we do pick up a lot of efficiency savings. That means that we don't have to spend that money in improving efficiencies with other things. Technically, depending on what you wanted to do, there are ways, if you had a very highly efficient geothermal system, envelope, there is a possibility that we could run into a scenario where we didn't have to do heat pump water heaters to be able to get the model to pass. It's just in a standard response and looking at standard design construction practices, we couldn't find a way to not be able to do without a heat pump water heater.
Thank you, James. Another question here by another attendee. Who can perform an on-site verification? Is there a CMVP requirement for a person performing a verification?
And I think both Abby and I have answers for this and different things. For the 45L for Energy Star, there's a specific person that goes through training, gets certified for Energy Star, and usually in conjunction with being a HERS writer. So there's a multiple certifications that are needed for someone to be able to do this and issue the certification for Energy Star and 45L. And same thing for Zero Energy Ready. There's very specific certifications needed.
Yes, and as James mentioned, for 179D, the requirements are a little bit different. So there is a site visit requirement that happens after the project is completed to visually verify that that energy efficient system was installed. In that case, a professional engineer licensed in the state of the building needs to perform that site visit. And so someone like myself or a member of my team would go out and perform that visit. But the nice thing with 179D is it can happen after the project. There aren't any requirements during the project where we need to go out and visually verify anything.
And since we're talking about both, it's also important to identify too that if you have a 4-story residential project, you can get both the 45L and the 179D. They can stack. Now, as we identified, maybe the needs for Energy Star might not lead to getting that much, but what it does do is all those energy efficiency measures put in work great to pushing your 179D up to the maximum allowed.
Yes, and on top of that, I think it's important to note, James, that if you meet the prevailing wage on one of them, then it's going to transfer over to the other program as well. So if you get those bonus rates on one, you likely are going to get those bonus rates on the other program, and you're going to see a ton of benefit.
Definitely. So Chris wants to know, what about the sound issues with heat pump water heaters?
Yeah, I saw that in the chat. We'll need to look that up and get back to you. At this time, I don't believe that there is any specific sound requirement in relation. Some of the other Energy Star measures have, like bath fans, they have to meet a specific sound rating. I don't believe that heat pump water heaters have any specific requirement to that have to be met at this time in relation to the heat, to sound and heat pump water heaters.
Got it. Thanks, James. Another person wants to know, can the 179D deduction be taken on a project completed last year, Abby?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, depending on who's claiming it, right? The designer or the building owner, we can look back several years. So if you completed a great project that falls in the commercial or that high-rise residential, you can still go back and claim the 179D deduction. It's not too late.
All right. Okay. We have a question from David here. It looks like it's a specific question. So he says, I'm working on a large student housing project. We are projecting ITC credits. The pre-construction ITC worksheet provided by the MEP design consultant doesn't follow either of these models. Energy Star has not been part of the conversation. It's based on a percentage of cost, labor and materials, for certain green components of the MEP systems. Is this a model you're familiar with?
I can probably jump in here, and James, maybe you can add some color on the backside with the Energy Star specifically. The investment tax credits are wonderful. They're available for specific renewable energy property plus systems like geothermal or thermal storage technologies. Oftentimes, these projects also trigger the other incentives. So if you're installing a thermal system of any sort, then you can also claim 179D. Your MEP design consultant just maybe doesn't know how to quote that incentive along with your investment tax credit, because you can take both on a project. You don't really need to do anything in consideration besides maybe talk to a consultant who understands 179D just to be sure that the systems you're installing are compliant. But otherwise, it's just doing an energy model for the 3 systems that we discussed, the HVAC, interior lighting, and building envelope, that would make you eligible for 179D.
Yes. James, anything you want to touch on there for Energy
No,
Star?
yeah, David, I think that the 179D and some of the other tax credits, you have some potential depending on what systems that you're putting in. But yeah, the 45L wouldn't be a good fit in this case if since you would need to do all the other Energy Star stuff that that we looked in and talked to. 179D, and like I said, and there's some other tax credits that if you want, you know, Abby and I can talk to you more about later.
David, very quickly, we just did a project with a developer who claimed 179D cost segregation and the investment tax credits on one project. So they do stack and they are possible. So feel free to reach out if you're interested to hear more.
So Brittany, I think this pertains to 179D. I think going back to what you were talking about in your presentation, Abby, maybe related to prevailing wage. So you have to meet both, not just one or the other to get the full deduction.
That's right. For 179D, you have to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements to claim those bonus rates. So that is a differentiating point from the 45L program, which is only has the prevailing wage requirement.
Great. Joe wants to know, are there domestic content requirements for these upgrades?
I think another intelligent question, I'm guessing, because it sounds like a reference to the investment tax credit again, which does have some domestic content requirements if you're going to pursue bonus credits. But for 179D, there are not. It does not matter where you get that equipment from. As long as it falls in one of those 3 categories, you're eligible to claim.
Awesome. And this person wants to know, do companies like Jordan and Scala offer energy modeling on 179D tax deductions, or is that TaxTaker?
That's a wonderful question. And TaxTaker and Jordan Skala have a partnership agreement. So that would definitely be TaxTaker. Seeing as how the requirements are much more taxy, and I've already admitted I'm more of a certification guy than the taxing. We want you to talk to the better experts at TaxTaker for the 179D.
That's right. And that's why we formed the partnership. So James and his team can help folks with the Energy Star certification, and we can help with the tax application piece.
Yes. And this person wants us to elaborate on the qualified retrofit plan. They missed that part of the presentation. So.
Yes, of course. So a qualified retrofit plan, as of what we know right now, because I do expect more guidance to come out from the IRS, hopefully this fall. But a qualified retrofit plan would be a retrofit to an existing building. That's number one. We can't look at new construction in this case. And it needs to be signed off by an architect or an engineer. So truly, it needs to be signed and sealed by a designer team to say that that project is being implemented to save energy. That is what we know from the IRS thus far. But again, more guidance will probably help us kind of narrow in on which projects are going to be the best. But if you're doing any sort of ESCO type work, or maybe you're installing things like LED lightings, we're going to go after other utility type rebates specifically for energy efficiency. If you have a professional engineer or an architect sign off on that, then that's going to be a great project.
Thank you, Abby. Brian wants to know.
Well,
go ahead, James.
Austin, I see that farther down in the list, somebody is asking, where is poll 3? Now might be a good time to get the 3rd poll up. We'll continue to answer questions to time, but we certainly want to know about poll 3.
Love it.
Yes, thanks, James.
As you guys are answering, we'll kind of continue here. Brian wants to know if we have any clients that are trying to use the alternative deduction.
I have a lot of clients, Brian, that really want to use it. But again, there isn't enough guidance from the IRS yet for us to actually implement this. So we're anxiously waiting. I am a part of a 179D coalition, and we've heard that they're going to prioritize it for this fall. As soon as we know, we're going to share with all of our clients, because I have several folks who think that this is going to be the better method for them to qualify.
Perfect. For the 179D deduction, would a typical lead energy model be sufficient to prove 25% savings, or would a new model be required that isolates HVAC, hot water, lighting, and building envelope systems only?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get it all the time. Lead energy models are a great start for us. There's a couple of things we have to consider for 179D. The first is there is a specific list of energy modeling software that we're allowed to use for this program. That's published online. You can Google it. So we have to make sure that that modeling software was used. And then two, yes, we do have to isolate those three systems because that is what the program is intending to incentivize. So sometimes we can alter a model in just the right case to reflect the 179D requirements. And in most cases, my team does this in day out. And so we'll just have them build a second model to isolate those systems. But good question.
Great question. So we've got about 3 to 4 minutes left. We will get through the rest of these, as many as the rest of these as we possibly can. But again, any that we don't get through, don't worry, we will send a document afterwards that answers all questions. So how are design teams sharing the 179D deduction?
Yes, good question. So I'm going to kind of loop a couple of these together because I see we've got some questions about K through 12s and 179D designers. So in the case of multiple designers, take a new construction of a K through 12 school, you might have an architect, an MEP engineer, even a design build project. So you might have a specialty contractor who could qualify as a designer. They absolutely can share in the deduction. And so what would happen is oftentimes with my clients who share, we recommend they get together as a group, decide how they want to split that. Sometimes they split it evenly, sometimes they split it based on project responsibility, but we try to get those designers together to agree upon a split so that when they request the allocation letter from the building owner, they're going in as a unified front. It makes it easy for the K through 12 school to allocate that deduction over because they don't have to choose any favorites. You do need the cooperation of the building owner to participate. So that allocation form is essential. It allows whatever designer is going to claim the 179D deduction to receive that on behalf of, let's say, Houston ISD or Dallas ISD as an example. So having their participation is important. But you cannot, I think I see here in a K through 12 client, can credits be sold to corporate partners, not the 179D program. The 179D cannot be sold to anybody or transferred to anybody except through that allocation letter method I mentioned before.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and close the poll and then get a couple of more questions here. So, and we've already answered this question. Are projects using 45L and 179D together?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
For your 4 stories and higher, absolutely.
And you just answered Angelica's question. If you have a hybrid project where some buildings are 4 stories and some that are 3 in multifamily, which will apply 179D or 45L?
Yes, great question. So if your buildings are truly separate, maybe you're doing a large residential complex, you have some 4-story standalone buildings and some 3-story, you can take 45L on all, and you would be able to claim 179D on your 4-story residential. And then say you have a clubhouse, you could also take 179D on that as well.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have time for about one or two more. So 179D is for designers and 45L is for owners, developers, correct? This is from Mark. Can both occur on the same project, but beneficiaries are not the same party?
Yes, good question, Mark. So 179D is for designers of government and tax exempt building owners. So think K through 12 school projects, maybe hospital projects. That's when a designer can claim it. In the case of an owner developer project, like a high-rise multifamily, if they're claiming 45L and they own the property and they pay taxes or have a tax appetite, then they can claim 179D as well as the building owner. So there are 2 different paths there where building owners can claim it and designers can claim it, depending on the ownership of the property.
Right. Well, we are at the top of the hour here, so that is all the questions we have time for. We will send answers to all the questions again in a document, even the ones that didn't get answered. You see Abby and James's emails there on the screen. If you have any follow-up questions and you want to direct to them, feel free to email them after this. And we will be sending out a recording of the full presentation as well. So stay tuned for that. And that is all. And thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.